In the future, things are no longer paid for with bills or credit cards, but with time. Here, everyone has a timer on their arm that indicates how much time they have left to live. The poor work only to survive one more day. Meanwhile, the richest have hundreds or even thousands of years on their timers. Will, a poor boy who just woke up with only 23 hours left to live, in this society of the year 2161, the genes that cause human aging was deactivated, so that people stopped aging at the age of 25. After reaching this stage, a 1-year countdown begins, and they have to find ways to buy time. That's why, incredibly, Rachel, Will's mother, is actually 50. But she never aged. Here, basic things like rent and food or transportation must be paid with time, which sounds a little familiar, right? But here, if someone runs out of time, they suffer a heart attack. When Rachel asks why he was late the night before, Will reveals that he worked overtime to buy her champagne to celebrate her 50th birthday. The happy moment is interrupted when she mentions wanting a grandchild, but Will makes it clear that he wasn't wasting his precious time on someone who would break his heart. Rachel tells him that while she has 3 days of time, they lose most of it paying rent in their debts. Will offers to earn extra money by fighting, but she refuses and reminds him that he has to pick her up from the bus after his 2-day work shift, as she'll have very little time left after paying for her transportation. On the way to the factory, Will is approached by an orphan neighbor named Maya, who asks him for a minute to pay off her debts. Will takes pity on her and gives her 5 minutes and proceeds to run since there's no time to lose. At work, while meeting with his friend Boral, who struggles with alcoholism, they discover that breakfast prices have increased. Price rises every day, and the little they earn in the factories is barely enough to live on. And to make matters worse, wages are stagnant, which makes Will feel very frustrated. We see how many of his colleagues die in broad daylight when they run out of money. After a full day manufacturing time storage and transfer devices, payday arrives. However, Will discovers his earnings have decreased, apparently because he didn't meet the new daily production quota. As night fell, Will entered a bar in search of his friends. He rejected women because he knew they would bankrupt him, and he collected an hour that one of his friends owed him for gambling. In the bar was Henry, a millionaire who had no more than a century of life on his watch. A huge difference, since in this neighborhood, people usually have 1 to 3 days. That's why he boasted about his time, buying drinks for everyone. He warned not to draw attention to himself. Will warned him that it was a dangerous place, and that they could steal his time. Our friend wasn't lying, because seconds later, Fortis appeared, a 75-year-old mobster who led a gang of gangsters called the Minutemen, who were dedicated to stealing time. Henry immediately challenged him to a fight for his time, but first, he went to the bathroom to vomit. Will took the opportunity to help him escape. Will tries to lock the door, but Fortis soon discovers him and chases him. Even so, Will manages to break into a warehouse and by resisting the lock, manages to outwit the gangsters. But one of his men reassures him, saying he knows where to find Will. Meanwhile, Will shelters Henry in one of his upstairs rooms, saying that Will has 18 hours left. Hamilton offers his help, but Will refuses. The millionaire tells him the truth. This man had already lived 105 years and is from a place called New Greenwich. This is the wealthiest place of all the areas. The people who live there have plenty of time. They are so rich that they're practically immortal. People were separated into different time zones based on their social status. The poorest, for example, were grouped into ghettos, enclosed by walls and security cameras, where they were charged quite high fees to prevent them from crossing into higher levels. Henry explains that he no longer wants to live, that his mind is tired. He doesn't know how he'll manage to live another 100 years. He had already gone too far. That's why he didn't care about putting his life in danger at the bar. Will gets annoyed because he thinks it's a very absurd problem. And both are right, because for Will's part, while the rich man complained about his time in the poor neighborhoods, where they did everything possible to obtain at least enough to survive one more day, but Henry actually has a point. What gives life meaning is death. Knowing that we have a limited time in this world makes us live with more purpose and makes us appreciate things because they are fleeting moments. Being immortal, as is the case with Henry, would take all the meaning out of life. Henry explains that there's actually enough time for everyone to live a normal life, but this time is poorly distributed. It's only in the hands of the few. It's an unjust system in which, for some to live forever, many must die before they sleep. The millionaire explained to Will that ceasing to exist is a necessary part of life. If he didn't act, it would produce an overpopulation that would deplete sources in just a few days. The problem is that the rich were accumulating time to become immortal, which is why they created this perverted system where they exploited the poor so they ran out of time and died quickly. Although there was actually enough time for everyone to have a long and decent life, all that was needed was a more equitable system. Henry asks Will what he would do if he had all this time, to which Will replies he would stop looking at it and not waste a single second. Henry realizes that he is the one, so the next morning, while Will is still asleep, he transfers all of his time to him and goes to sit on a bridge while he waits for his time to come. When Will wakes up, he realizes that Henry has given him everything. He sees a message on the window, "Don't waste my time." Will looks at the window, sees Henry in the distance, and understands what he's about to do. He runs out to try to catch him, but the man's time reaches 0, and his time in this world ends. Will arrived too late. However, we see that a security camera captured this moment, which will bring him consequences. Seeking help, he visits Boral, who lives with his wife Greta and their newborn daughter. Once alone, Will tells him what happened with Henry in his timeline, making it clear that it also helps him understand the importance of the century. Boral warns him that he has to leave because he is in great danger in that violent place. Upon hearing this, as a token of gratitude for his friendship, Will transfers a decade of his time to Boral. Having done so, Will leaves, telling him he'll use his time to take his mother to New Greenwich. However, we see Boral, instead of using the new time to improve his life and the life of his family, the first thing he does is to go to the bar to get drunk. Although In Time is a science fiction movie, the world it presents is not as distant from our own as it seems. In the film, people pay for everything with time they have left to live. In our world, we use money instead, but money is ultimately connected to the same resources, our time. Every second that passes is part of our lives that cannot be recovered, yet we spend so much of that limited time working to earn enough money to survive. We spend around 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and often decades working to afford food, housing, transportation, and other necessities. Behind every price is a time spent working. This is why comparisons show how many hours someone must work to afford something like an iPhone. We see a price in money, but behind it are hours of someone's life. In Time simply makes this exchange literal. The same cycle exists in Will's neighborhood. People work to earn more time, then spend that time on necessities of survival, forcing them to work again. Their lives become a constant cycle of working, earning, paying, and repeating, leaving little time that truly belongs to them. The difference is that the wealthy have thousands of years and therefore the freedom to decide how they spend their time, while the poor are constantly fighting to survive another day. In this world, wealth gives people something more valuable than comfort, control over their time. Through its exaggerated premise, In Time makes us question how much of our limited time we exchange for money, and how much remains for actual living. After this, Will goes to wait for his mother to tell her the big news. The woman, after 2 days, had just finished work. However, when she's about to take the bus back home, the driver tells her that the fare went up the same day. The woman only has an hour and a half, and the bus costs 2. Will's mother begs the driver, explaining that it's a 2-hour walk to her house, so she won't be able to make it. The driver replies, "You'll have to run." He closes the door and the bus leaves. The woman runs as fast as she can, trying to stop other buses and even trying to ask other people for time. But no one helps her, and time is running out. Meanwhile, Will waits happily for his mother with a bouquet of flowers, eager to tell her the news. When he notices that she isn't getting off the bus, he understands that something's very bad is happening. So he throws down the flowers and runs to find her. Time is running out, and they're both on the same avenue. Will has all the time in the world to give her, but his mother only has a few seconds left. They see each other in a distance. They both quicken their pace. The woman runs for her life, and when they're about to shake hands, time runs out. His mother falls, death in his arms, and there's nothing more that can be done. Will, who now has what he always lacked, has lost the most important thing. When Will's mother died, his frustration comes from realizing that having time means very little when you have lost the person you wanted to share it with. For the first time, Will has more time than he could ever need, yet he could not use any of it to bring his mother back. Her death shows that the value of his time comes from how we experience it and who we spend it with. What makes her death even more painful is that she died because she could no longer afford to continue living. Prices kept increasing while the amount of time she could earn throughout the week remained insufficient. Every day became a race to earn enough to pay for the next one, leaving room for unexpected expenses or mistakes. It's a clear connection to our world. Low-income families can face a similar struggle when the cost of housing, food, transportation, and other necessities rises faster than their wages. People can work the same hours and still have less money available, forcing them to work for more or sacrifice other parts of their lives simply to keep up. Will's mother's death, therefore, represents the human cost of a system where survival becomes increasingly expensive. She was working and doing everything she could, yet the conditions around her kept becoming harder. Will now has centuries ahead of him, but none of that time can replace the moment he lost with his mother. Her death reminds us that time is valuable because it is limited and because it allows us to experience life with people we care about. The film's countdown may be fictional, but the fear of running out of time is something many people already understand. After this event, Will remembers Henry's words.
For a few to be immortal, many must die.
So he decides to take revenge on the system, ordering a taxi to travel to New Greenwich to see how he can change things. It is here that he realizes the methods of control in this cruel reality. This society is divided by time zones. If you want to move from one zone to another, you have to pay a toll. The further you advance, the better the quality of life and the opportunities become. But the price to advance keeps rising. Just to leave the first zone, which is the 12, Will has to pay for a month. And remember that most people in this neighborhood don't even have more than 3 days on their account. So leaving that place is practically impossible for them. This is very similar to reality, where things that could improve people's futures, such as better food, a safe place to live, quality education, or places with better opportunities, are unaffordable for the people who need to get ahead, leaving them trapped in their same situation. In this society, there's also kind of a police force, the Time Guardians. They're basically police officers, and their function is to maintain order and keep the system running. Upon seeing what happened on the security cameras, Raymond, the leader of the Guardians, goes to investigate the crime scene and assumes that someone stole all of Henry's time and got rid of him. He's not sure if it was a robbery, but given that it's such a poor and violent neighborhood, he assumes it's the most logical motive. So he sets out to investigate who the culprit was. Will arrives at a border crossing number 8, where the price increases to 2 months. And at the 4th border crossing, he loses a year of his life. The driver explains that he has just entered Greenwich, and realizing he doesn't belong there, asks why he didn't decide to come. Without any fear, Will reveals that he will avenge his mother's death against the rich. Once there, as he always had to run, Will instinctively quickens his pace until he remembers that, like everyone else there, he doesn't need to worry about time. Even so, he attracts the attention of a young woman surrounded by bodyguards named Sylvia. Will continues to blend in, and rents a suit that costs more than 2 months a night. Meanwhile, with the video of Will on the bridge, Raymond deduces that no one with a century of time would stay in the ghetto because of all the dangers. So he knows that Will left that city. And he's right. The next day, Will wakes up in his luxurious room with his 105 years intact. He used to do this every day because it was a constant worry, but now he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. This analogy applies exactly the same way to money in the real world. For many, the lack of money becomes the only thought that consumes them, and these patterns remain intact for years. Just as someone who doesn't know if they will see the sunrise due to the lack of time lives with the uncertainty of not knowing if they will have a plate of food tomorrow, so does someone without resources. In other words, if you're drowning, the only thing you can think about is breathing. His anxious, undeniable behavior continues to attract attention, not only from Sylvia, who observes him from outside, but also from the hotel chambermaid, who, sensing he's an infiltrator, advises him to move with more confidence so as not to lose his elegance. When Will asks her about the casino, she warns him that he'll need a better suit to get in. Meanwhile, officers confirm to Raymond that a review of the records revealed that someone recently paid for years to cross the border into Greenwich. Raymond knows that being from the ghetto, Will instinctively runs, and thanks to this, they're able to identify him in the hotel security footage. Raymond mentions that he knows Will's father. That night, now wearing a suit, Will arrives at the casino, where, not being a member, he must pay for a full year's membership to enter. An employee lets him and guides him to a poker table, where there's no betting limit. Will sits down and starts chatting with everyone, but especially with this man, Philip, one of the richest men in the world. He didn't make his fortune through hard work and effort. He simply comes from a family of bankers and moneylenders, a business where having money makes you more money. And this makes perfect sense, since in real life, many powerful people have made their fortune this way, through accumulated generational wealth. The bets continue, and the amount keeps increasing. Meanwhile, we see Sylvia arrive in the room, sit at the table, and makes eye contact with Will, who recognizes her immediately. Having seen her just a few hours earlier, Phil asks why he doesn't have bodyguards, but Will responds appropriately, saying that he knows none of them need to rob him. When Will enters the casino, he encounters a world completely different from the one he grew up in. Philip, who has almost 10,000 years of life, seeing the enormous difference in lifespan between the rich and the poor as something natural. To him, the wealthy have survived because they are the fittest. fittest, and therefore deserve the advantages that come with having more time. He views this inequality as part of the evolution. Those who are successfully accumulate more resources, while those who cannot keep up eventually disappear. This idea could be understood as a form of survival of the fittest, applied to capitalism. In the world of in time, wealth determines how long you live, so economic success becomes directly connected to survival. The rich accumulate thousands of years while the poor struggle to gain a few more days. For Philip, this is simply how the system works, and he sees no reason to question it whether it's fair. His perspective is heavily shaped by his privilege. Having lived for thousands of years, he has become so disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people that he cannot understand why that system must be unjust. He sees his wealth and longevity as a result of being successful, while ignoring the advantages that allowed him to become successful in the first place. Will, however, comes from a world where people can die because they cannot afford another day. Will agrees and accepts the bet, leaving himself with only a few seconds to live. They both reveal cards, and Will wins the bet. With 3 seconds left to live, he places his hand on the device again, and 1,100 years are reverted to his original age. This impresses everyone, especially Silva, and more importantly, earns Phil's respect. Recognizing Will's worth and observing his interest in Sylvia and his confusion about their relationship, Philip formally introduces her as his daughter. Sylvia then invites him to the party her family is hosting the following day. To blend in, Will decides to buy a sports car for the modest price of 59 years. As night falls, the party arrives, where Philip introduces his young-looking mother-in-law and his wife, Michelle. Later, during the party, Sylvia approaches Will, and while they dance, she begins questioning him, revealing that she saw him running, just like the people from the ghetto she sometimes envies. Will swears to her that he belongs in Greenwich, but then Sylvia mentions that, for her, the biological clock benefits no one, since the poor die and the rich don't experience life, as if they can live forever if they stay out of it. Upon hearing this, Will decides to take her from the party straight into the beach on his backyard, where he invites her to go swimming with him. She jumps into the water with him. However, that moment is interrupted, as her father is looking for her, so they return to the party. Here, Philip invites Will to play a game, seeking a rematch, but at that moment, Raymond and his timekeepers burst into the party. Will knows they're coming for him, but he also knows he did nothing wrong. This takes Will to a private room where he proceeds with the interrogation, asking what he's doing in Greenwich. Will reminds him that changing time zones isn't illegal, and when Raymond questions the origin of the time of his vital clock, Will explains that he won most of it gambling, but the rest was a gift from Henry, who was tired of everything. Raymond doesn't believe a thing. Will responds by making it clear that he's not a thief, and that if he's looking for one, they should arrest the wealthy people at the party. However, Raymond explains that as a guardian of time, morality doesn't concern him. He only seeks to defend time, and knows that this century isn't his rightful place. It's almost as if the elites don't want intruders and want to push those who seek justice. With that, he has all of Will's time taken away, leaving him with only 2 hours for his registration and processing. But before he leaves, he confronts him. Will asks why he makes a deal out of the loss of the rich people's life when hundreds die every day in the ghetto. Upon hearing this, Raymond reveals that he knew his father, who thought the same way. Will then attacks the guards to free himself, and it takes advantage of Sylvia being alone to use her as a hostage. He escapes with the girl. The guardians chase him, but after some maneuvering, he manages to hide under a bridge, and thus loses them all. Will looks at his watch and notices he doesn't have much time, so he asks the girl for a little, but she brushes him off. She realizes that Will is indeed from the ghetto, and now that the image she had of him completely changed. They drive until dawn. However, Will gets distracted and falls into a trap of nails, causing the car to overturn and both of them to lose consciousness. This trap was set by the mafia, who are looking for Will to get revenge. They see his watch and assume that when he wakes up, he'll be dead, so they leave him. However, they steal all of Sylvia's time, leaving her with only 30 minutes. And after this, the mobsters leave. When they wake up, Sylvia panics because she never had so little time before. She was used to a very comfortable and carefree life. However, now she's in the same situation as the vast majority of the people in this society, which will open her eyes. This level of scarcity and stress is normal in Will's life. So, faced with the need, Will gives her a little time, and they run to save their lives. After this, Raymond arrives and confirms his suspicion upon seeing Will's abandoned car. Then, after receiving his payment, which is a little more life, we realize that although he, as a worker for the system who helps maintain the order, still belongs to it, he's not very different from Will, who still has to worry about surviving, although under much less pressure than the people of the ghetto. He shows us that he is just another pawn. He investigates the car from his headquarters and deduces that Will returned to his neighborhood, but he won't look for him, as he knows Will will come to him. As his first option, Will tries to turn to his best friend. However, when he arrives home, his wife opens the door crying because something terrible happened with the money Will gave his friend. He went to get drunk at the bar and ended up drowning in alcohol with 9 years left on his watch. Will is overcome with immense guilt. Boral's death raises an important question about what happens when someone who has spent their lives struggling to survive suddenly receives more time than they could ever need. Boral's life has been defined by scarcity. He has worked, worried, and spent time trying to make it through the next day. When Will gives an enormous amount of time, that struggle suddenly disappears. But Boral has no idea what to do with the freedom he's been given. He drinks himself to death, showing that having more time does not automatically give the time meaning. There is something similar that can happen when people suddenly become wealthy, such as through winning the lottery. Someone who has spent their entire life worrying about money might suddenly have enough to never worry about it again. Yet they may not have the knowledge, habits, or experience needed to manage that wealth. When survival has been the main focus of someone's life, it could be difficult to suddenly think in terms of decades, goals, or investments, or purpose. The constraints may disappear overnight, while the mindset created by those constraints remains. This makes Boral's story more complicated than simply saying he did not know how to use his time. His entire life had prepared him to survive, not to be free. When a person lives inside a constrained struggle for long enough, that struggle could become a kind of a mental prison. Even after the external limitation disappears, it can take time to understand how to live without it. Boral, therefore, represents another side of the value of time. Having more of it can give us freedom, but freedom alone does not tell us what to do with our lives. If someone spends their entire existence trying to obtain more money or time, they may eventually reach a point where they have everything they wanted and still feel lost. The real challenge is learning what the freedom is for. They only have a couple of minutes left, so they have to act fast. Sylvia has a diamond earring, so they decide to go pawn them. The owner sees that they're both practically corpses, so he offers them a misery for their diamonds, and they have no choice but to accept. Will gives Sylvia her shares and takes her to a payphone so she can call her father. Philip answers. Will asks to speak to the keeper of time, and tells them that if they want Sylvia back, they will have to deposit 1,000 years into the neighborhood charity by dawn. This is an insignificant amount for Philip, but he still considers it. Thanks to this call, Raymond manages to track Will's location and goes after him. Meanwhile, Will takes Sylvia to his house, but she's terrified of the ghetto. Once there, he gives her clothes and tells her a little about his family. He says his mother died because basically she was poor and that his father died in a fight, since that's what they did for a living. The man was very good and always won. Sylvia asks how he did that, and Will tells her the secret. In this society, there's a kind of arm wrestling. It consists of flipping your opponent's forearm to take away their time. Will tells her that the key is to give the other person the advantage, and at the last second, when your opponent is distracted by looking at the clock, you take advantage and turn the fight around. However, Will mentions that his father was practically murdered because he gave away all the time he gained, which meant giving hope. After this, they chatted about how their clocks had been activated upon turning 25. Undoubtedly quite different situations. Debts accumulate for Will's, while Sylvia's father gave her time to celebrate. After this, Sylvia asked him if he hated her, and he assured her that he didn't, since no one decided where they were born. The next morning, they noticed that ransom money never arrived at the ghetto. Nevertheless, Will released Sylvia, knowing he wouldn't be a bad man. He escorted her to a payphone to tell her father, but before doing so, he gave her a gun, just in case. She responded with a kiss. She clearly liked him. At that moment, Raymond appeared, pointing his gun at Will. When Sylvia noticed, she shot him in the shoulder, disarming the officer, who then stole his patrol car. Beforehand, however, he transferred some of the time. After all, he knew the guards also lived on the edge of time to avoid being attacked. After this, they get in the car and flee to buy more time, in a car that isn't a police car. Will and Sylvia steal a vehicle and borrow some time from the passenger. She asks him how he could live with so little time. Will explained that his whole life has been spent living as if it was his last day. He preferred that to accumulating time at the cost of suffering. These words made Sylvia decide to help him with his mission to become closer. The couple then makes their first move to try and destabilize the system. They steal a truck and rob a bank. They practically destroy it and raid the vault, stealing dozens of time capsules. Afterward, they tell the spectators to come in and take whatever they want. Will then gives a capsule containing decades to a deceased friend's wife, donates it to street children, and fills the charity with time so everyone can have a little. This infuriates Raymond, as there's money circulating that shouldn't be in those areas, money that would eventually have serious consequences. But Will and Sylvia's actions also enrage the mafia, and since the neighborhood residents now have more time and can defend themselves better, it's ruining their business. Therefore, both sides will try to put an end to their pair of Robin Hoods. This is something we can also see in real life. Those who hold power tend to protect the structures that allow them to keep that power. In this case, Will and Sylvia are disrupting a system that has benefited certain groups for generations, including the wealthy, the timekeepers, and the mafia. These groups respond by trying to preserve the system because it has constantly worked in their favor, rather than because they believe the system itself is fair or morally right. Will and Sylvia work together in a hotel where they suddenly hear noises outside. It was Raymond, who had come out to put an end to their actions. However, Will acts quickly and then try to escape. They break the windows, jump out, and run through the streets. But Raymond was not far behind and pursued them relentlessly. The couple managed to escape and find safety. The next morning, they went to a hotel where they bought all the rooms. Here, Sylvia thanked her boyfriend for saving her life. She said she would much rather be a fugitive with him than live a life in a bubble in her mansion while people outside are suffering. Meanwhile, the mobster threatened several people in the ghetto to get Will's location, thus discovering the hotel's address. The mobsters entered the room and captured the couple. They could have made things easy, but Fortes liked to make things more interesting, so he challenged Will to a fight. Fortes did them daily and was quite good. However, as soon as the Will was distracted to look at his watch, Will turned it around, applying his father's trick and using the element of surprise to finish them off with his hidden weapon. After winning the fight, they realized the harsh reality. The government is raising prices on everything. This way, no matter how much money they give to the poor, it will never be enough. Instead of doing good, they're making things worse. Robbing a small bank isn't enough. They need to destabilize the economy for something to happen, and luckily, they know someone with enough capital to do it. They return to New Greenwich, to the same place where Sylvia's father is being escorted by the many men. The girl calmly approaches from behind, and everyone is alarmed. She declares that she wants to surrender and speak with her father. At that moment, Will, who had been posing as one of them, pulls out a gun and takes Philip's hostage. Philip tells his guards to lower the weapons. Will and Sylvia take him up in the elevator and walk to the main office, where the safe is located. The vault opens, revealing 1 million years in hands of a single man. At that same time, in Will's neighborhood, people die every day simply because they have run out of time. The contrast is obvious. One person has more time than he could ever use, while the others are struggling to survive. Faced with the situation, Philip responds that he will recover them, and that they're only providing stability to one or at most 2 generations. Here, we get a debate as old as time, because Philip questions Will and now Sylvia's ideology. Giving that time to everyone might only be a temporary solution. People will continue seeking wealth, and those who are already rich will find ways to regain what they already lost. Within a few years, the same imbalance could emerge again. The film also shows that having more resources is not guaranteed that they will be used wisely. Borrell, for example, has access to an enormous amount of time, yet he wastes it on alcohol until it kills him. So this scene presents 2 opposing views. Will sees concentrated wealth as a problem that should be distributed, while Philip sees inequality as something that will naturally return because of how people behave. 2 completely different ideologies clashing, where only you, as a viewer, can draw your own conclusions, the one you deem most appropriate. The timekeeper's alarms begin to sound. Raymond sees the millions of years have escaped from New Greenwich and realizes that this could be the end, so he sets out to prevent the amount of time from being injected into the poor neighborhoods. Raymond spots the couple and the chase begins. However, they take the lead and advance towards their final destination, Will's neighborhood. However, when they're about to arrive, Raymond rams them, and he needs to stop them at all costs. Will gets out of the car as best as he can. Will gives the capsule with millions of years to the little girl, so she can take it to the charity. Saying that there's time, all the inhabitants of the place begin to run. Will and Sylvia take advantage of the chaos to escape from Raymond, who doesn't stop chasing them, as they flee to get away from the chaos and from Raymond. Time begins to disrupt among everyone. However, the timekeeper is determined to capture them, so they take that vehicle and chase them. When he arrives, he gets out of the car and interrupts them. Here, Raymond reveals that he too was very poor. That's why he can run just like Will. But he managed to get out of the neighborhood by becoming a policeman, even if this seems perpetuating the system. Will reveals that neither he nor Sylvia have much time left, which makes Raymond look at his watch and realize he hadn't charged his supplies. He only had seconds left. Without warning, he collapsed, a victim of the very system he was defending. The pair was desperate. Their time was running out too. They only had 1 minute left. At that moment, Will spotted the patrol car, and Raymond, remembering he could use the Guardian's charges, quickly ran towards it. They only had 20 seconds left, so they started running as fast as they could to buy themselves some time. Will was fast, so he arrived first, transferred briefly, and ran back to Sylvia, who only had 7 seconds left. When he got close enough, he jumped and managed to save her life.
In New Greenwich, the entire system begins to collapse. The citizens of the poor neighborhoods now have more time and they look happy to actually start living, so they can move to places with better opportunities. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia's work doesn't end, as they now have become bank robbers to get more money and redistribute it among the poorest. In the end, aside of the different ideologies, this movie reminds us that money really does buy time. Every hour we spend working is another hour we cannot spend living. Having enough resources can give us more freedom over how those hours are used. The system may make the freedom harder to achieve for some than others, but the message is ultimately simple. Use the resources you have to experience life, rather than spending your life accumulating them more, because no matter how much money of time we have, our days are still numbered.